Calling all stations, calling all stations. This is KN4JHB. My name is Brandon. I will be your net control station for this evening's Carroll County Aries MCOM net. This net meets every Thursday night, 8 p.m. local time, on the W4FWD repeater on 146.640 MHz with a negative offset and a 131.8 Hz subaudible tone. The purpose of this net is to provide training and information as it relates to emergency communications and providing communications assistance to various local, state, and or national public service agencies in the event of an actual emergency. Anyone not wishing to participate in this net is asked to please keep the frequency clear for net operations. However, all amateur radio operators are welcome to participate in this net. You do not have to be a member of Aries or wgars to participate in this net. This is a directed net. Please direct all traffic through net control or designated station. Is there a station on frequency willing to act as alternate net control operator in the event that this station becomes disabled?
This is N4BWR, I'll do it.
That's Blake. All right. I appreciate it, Mr. Blake, and we've got you logged in as well. Yep. If you wish to pass traffic, or if you wish to pass emergency or priority traffic during the net, please say the word break twice, and the frequency will be turned over to you for the duration of the emergency. I will now stand by for anyone with emergency or priority traffic. Okay, nothing heard. NTS formatted messages may also be initiated or passed on this net. If there are any stations wishing to list traffic for the net, please call now. Okay, nothing heard. When checking into this net, say this is and unkey the mic to be sure that you're not doubling with anyone. If you do not hear anyone else talking, proceed to give your call sign first phonetically and then alphanumerically, along with your name, location, and if you have any announcements, comments, or traffic for the net. At this time, we will now take check-ins from any mobile, portable, or short-time stations. All mobile, portable, or short-time stations, please call now.
This is Whiskey Charlie 4 Echo Echo. That's WC4EE, Lonnie in Carrollton. Good evening to the net. November 4, Oscar, Philadelphia, Alabama.
All right, let me jump in here and recognize WC4EE, Mr. Lonnie, and KN4OSO, Mr. Phillip. Are there any more mobile, portable, or short-time stations? Please call now. Okay, hearing none. I'll now call for regular check-ins. Are there any Alpha, November, or Whiskey stations wishing to check in? Please call now.
This is Whiskey Delta 8, Lima, Quebec Tango, WD8LQT, John Fairfield. Good evening, Brandon.
This is Bravo Kilo, WX4BK, Brian and Temple.
All right, let me jump in right here. Mr. Brian, you had somebody double with you. That station that double with WX4BK. If you would give your call sign, give your call sign again, please. All right. I guess we'll move on. Any more Alpha November Whiskey stations wishing to check in, please call now.
This is, maybe I double with him, Whiskey Delta 8, Lima, Quebec Tango, WD8LQT, John and Fairfield.
I've already got John.
This is November 4, Charlie, India, Papa, N4 CIP, Scott in Douglasville. This is Alpha India 4, Romeo Tango, AI4RT, John, Peachtree City. Good evening.
All right, let me jump in here and recognize WD8LQT, Mr. John, WX4BK, Mr. Brian, N4CIP, Mr. Scott, and AI4RT, Mr. John. Any more Alpha November or Whiskey stations, please call now. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. Any Kilo stations wishing to check in, please call now.
This is
KE4OBE.
This is Kilo Echo 4, Oscar Bravo Echo, KE4OBE, Mike in Carrollton. Good evening, everyone.
This is Kilo X-Ray 4 Delta Victor. That's KX4DV, Andrew at Buchanan, and I'm going to be short-staffed tonight. I've got a sick little one.
This is KK4 CTV. That's Kilo 4, Charlie Tango Victor. The name's Charlie. I'm calling in from Rookville.
Want me to shorten it tonight? All right, I'll jump in here and recognize KE4OBE, Mr. Mike, KX4DV, Mr. Andrew, and KK4CTV, Mr. Charlie. Are there any more Kilo stations wishing to check in? Please call now.
This is Kilo 4, November Bravo, KK4 MBB, Michael, Heflin, Alabama. No traffic.
This is Kilo November 4, Bravo Sierra Romeo, that is KN4, BSR, Billy here in Moody checking in.
Okay, we'll jump in here and recognize KK4 NBB, Mr. Michael, and KN4 BSR, Mr. Billy. One more call for Kilo stations. Any more Kilo stations, please call in.
This is Kilo November 4, Bravo November X-Ray, KN4 BNX, Eric and Temple.
up here and recognize KN4BNX, Mr. Eric. We'll go ahead and open it up. Any station, any prefix, please call now. Okay, hearing none. We'll now move on to the announcements portion of the net. Any station with announcements or traffic for the net, please call now. Okie dokie, hearing none. We'll move on to the training portion of the net, and I will pass it off to WX4BK. Mr. Bryan, what do you have for us tonight, sir?
This is WX4BK. Thank you, Nat. Last week we were talking about NVIS antennas. That's November Victor India Sierra, and it's acronym for Near Vertical Incident Skywave. We normally pronounce it NEVIS. And we talked about the fact that that type of an antenna is really useful for your emergency communications. Spoke briefly about how it works. I want to talk a little bit more about that. I guess to start with, we normally hang our antennas kind of high, our HF antennas anyway, when we can, because it provides us the best skip in order to make international contacts. We're going to talk a little bit about why and how we can actually do the opposite of that, where it can be useful for emergency communication. The rule of thumb for HF is that you'll get better DX the higher your antenna, and the reason for that is the typical dipole antenna is raised higher than the takeoff angle of most of the radio signals becomes shallower, closer to the horizon. This shallower angle provides the greater skip of the radio signal off the atmosphere, just like skipping a rock on water. Remember, however, that not all the signal is on one narrow angle, just the largest single component. It's like a bell curve where angles above and below the takeoff angle will have decreasing levels of signal. What many don't think about is the converse. That is, the antenna moves closer to the ground, the takeoff angle becomes steeper until at some point it points almost straight up. This is the result of the ground being close enough to interact with the dipole and act as a sort of reflector, just like in a Yagi antenna. Now, conventional wisdom is that once an antenna's height is below 1/4 wavelength, the antenna is a NEVIS antenna. It is really more appropriate to say that at 1/4 wavelength, the antenna becomes more NEVIS than conventional, but will still exhibit tendencies of both. The reason is the takeoff angle is a gradual thing as opposed to flipping a switch. So as the antenna is gradually raised, the takeoff angle gradually decreases. And as an antenna is lowered closer to the ground, the takeoff angle gradually increases. Since ideal performance for DX communications is a half wavelength, most of us are probably operating somewhere between DX and NEVIS anyway. As an 80-meter antenna would ideally need to be 140 feet in the air to eliminate any NEVIS properties. Note I mentioned 8 meters being a hybrid of NEVIS and DX for most of us, and probably mostly NEVIS. As the wavelength decreases and at the same time your frequency increases, the typical antenna installation will become more DX and less NEVIS, because remember, we're talking about wavelength. So to minimize the NEVIS component, you would need an antenna at 70 feet for 40 meters, 35 feet for 20 meters, and 18 feet for 10 meters. Most of us are probably operating with a significant NEVIS component on our antennas until we get to 20 meters, unless we're really lucky and have a really high antenna. Now, some of you are saying, hey, wait a second, I'm DXing on 80 meters with an antenna that's only 20 or 30 feet in the air. And I have no doubt you're telling the truth. As I said earlier, the takeoff angle isn't a razor's edge. It has a width to it, meaning you'll have NEVIS and DX components even when the antenna is lower than ideal. So we've concluded that we want our antenna somewhere below a quarter wave to have a more significant Nevis component to our signals. But how would we do this? Or how low would we go? Many proponents say as low as 10 feet off the ground, which just sounds unbelievable to me, especially for 80 and 40 meters. However, despite my disbelief, many have tested antennas anywhere from 30 feet and 15 feet, getting reports, get this, by lowering an antenna from 30 feet to 15 feet off the ground when communicating with people within a 300-mile radius, because that's what we're using Nevis for. They're getting reports of a 15 dB stronger signal from stations inside that 300-mile radius, and a 4S unit decrease in noise using that lower antenna. Most Nevis experimenters agree that 10 to 15 feet height for 40 or 80 meters is actually a good height. Now, some have experimented with creating a ground Yagi by running